In this second part of the shading skills demonstration, I'm going to show you how to get creative with the ways you shade. Really, you can invent pretty much any mark to make an area darker, and that's kind of one of the wonderful things about shading, is that it doesn't, you don't have to do the exact traditional skills. I am doing kind of just like long skinny lines to try to create this gradation where it goes from dark to light. And I'm just trying to fill in all the white spaces by pushing nice and hard in the darker area. And I want it to have kind of a random, kind of streaky, stripy look, but that would look kind of like some sort of a sky off in the distance. Okay. And I'm letting just whatever's happening kind of be my new pattern for this area. I'm kind of inventing it as I go along. So I invite you to play around with ways to shade. I'm just trying to get this like streaky look, and I want it to get really dark over here, like there's some storm clouds back in the distance. Okay, I'm going to take a pen, because a pen is also, I love shading with ballpoint pens. They're a great way to create value, especially for things like cross hatching. If you have a great Sharpie or ink pen of some sort, they're great for shading techniques where you're doing specific lines. Now, if you have a nice ink pen, you can do shading technique called stippling, which are little dots. I'm not going to demonstrate that here because it takes quite a while, and I don't happen to have a Sharpie handy here during distance learning at my house. So I'm just going to use my trusty ballpoint pen. People have, you think a pen can only make a line, but a lot of people have explored ballpoint pens just because they're handy, and they've discovered that they can do a pretty beautiful smooth shading with a ballpoint pen. So here I'm just doing a whole bunch of little marks. I call them dashes. It's kind of like you're shading with kind of like you're shading with with stippling, but instead of the little teeny dots, I'm making lines just because it's a lot faster. Though some people just can put on a nice song and really sink into making those little dots and enjoying that experience. It's quite a lengthy procedure because it's like you're doing a single dot at a time. This way I'm getting a little bit more real estate covered with my marks. The sky is usually pretty light. Most people kind of see the pattern in the medium to light areas anyway. So that is kind of an example of using little dashes. Here, I'm going to do a real curved cross hatching, and I'm going to go ahead and do it with my pen just because I can. So kind of, I'm imagining that there's a hillside covered with like some sort of seagrass. And so I'm going to do kind of a curved set of cross hatching. I'm going to share with you guys, I love cross hatching. Cross hatching is fast, and often from far away, it looks just like smooth shading, which is kind of an interesting an interesting thing, because you would think that it would always look like separate lines, but somehow the eye blends all those little lines, and truthfully most of these shapes, it blends them into a smoothness from far off, which is kind of an interesting thing, I think. Choose a word to do. For example, I could do something like sky, 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 over and over again, and do layers, and it will make, the word sky will make its own pattern. If you do really curly letters, then it'll make a totally different pattern. So people like to play around with seeing what word, what texture each word that they write will have. So I've written sky a whole bunch of times, and then I'm going to start to layer my sky. I'm having a hard time writing the word sky while saying other words, and it takes a little mental coordination, I'm not going to lie. So you can see how by layering, you're starting to see it as kind of a mark making technique rather than a word, because you kind of can't read it after a while, but I know what it says, and I know it says sky, and I'm making a sky, so that is pleasing to me. And the more layers you do, the less you'll be able to see it, and the more it will look like just a specific and kind of special kind of shading technique. So you could do your name, you could write clouds, you could write whatever word you want, and you will get a different look with each word that you do, okay? Okay, and in this little stripe, I've reserved it for smooth shading. Smooth shading is, I consider it to be the most difficult of the techniques, because it requires a lot of patience and layering. So to do smooth shading, I just gently make layers, and I try to end each layer at random different spots and do a lot of overlapping. So I'm just laying a thin layer across my paper, and I'm going to do that over and over again. It's not wise to push really hard if you want it to look smooth, because you'll make grooves in the paper that you cannot shade over. So I don't know if you can really tell in this video, but I'm doing like a stripe, and I'm going in a very slightly different direction for the next kind of bunch of shading that I'm doing. And I'm going back and targeting white spots. Like with all of these techniques, targeting white spots is a big part of making your gradation look like you want it to look. Okay, I am going to switch to my darker pencil. Oopsie, it's a little bit. My dull dark pencil. It's not sharp enough to do this task. I guess I'll go back to my regular pencil. It takes a light hand to not make this look like something that I call streaky shading. Streaky shading is where you're kind of just shading and you're pushing nice and hard, so your lines are all obvious. Now, streaky shading can look pretty cool if you do it right, if you do it in a direction that makes sense with your picture. But smooth shading is something different from streaky shading, and you should try your hand at it with in this space here, so that you can kind of get a sense of how to make things look smooth when you want them to look smooth. Smoothness obviously is awesome for skies when you're wanting to do skin. It's nice to be able to do a smooth shading. And it has just a beautiful, beautiful, very subtle look. So I encourage you to try your hand at smooth shading. And to build up to darkness, you definitely need to do a lot of layers, okay? The darkness, you shouldn't just push as hard as you can, because you will get grooves in your paper, and it can even kind of stretch your paper out, so you kind of have bumped out paper in that area, which isn't that great. This kind of respects the texture of the paper. Okay, so over there, you can see that I have layered and darkened this area. I'm targeting any spot that looks a little like whiter than the other spots. Okay, I think we have it.